There's a lot to say about questions and questioning techniques. However, the bottom line is this. If we're going to be good teachers, we need to know how to ask good questions. Questions that will get our students thinking, questions that are more than just single-word answers, questions that will brush the cobwebs from their heads and make the gears start spinning, questions that will excite and motivate them, questions that they can't help but want to get involved with. And that is an art. Now, I'm not great at asking good questions, but we've all got to start somewhere. And so here's some tips that we can work on together to get us started. Just like any new skill, learning to ask good questions requires advanced preparation. They need to be thoughtfully worded and sequenced. They should be a part of our lesson plans and used as an instructional tool. Questions should be clear and specific. The vocabulary should be appropriate to the content matter. And each question should have a specific purpose. Let's take a look at 8 different kinds of questions that we can use in a classroom setting. There are analytical questions, clarifying, convergent, cueing questions, divergent, evaluative, focus, and probing questions. Let's take a few moments to discuss each of them. As we explore and discuss different kinds of questions, let's select a topic where we can create examples for each different type of question. Sleep is one that I think we can all relate to, especially since none of our students ever seem to get enough sleep. So let's use sleep as a topic as we create different examples for each of our categories. After we discuss each category, pause the video and take 2 minutes to write a question of your own down using that category and sleep as a topic. When you've finished, share your question with your neighbor. Go ahead and exchange comments about each other's questions. The first category we'll explore is analytical questions. Analytical questions stimulate thinking on the student's part. They encourage them to analyze and critique information. They're often open-ended questions and they have multiple appropriate responses. My example of an analytical question for my students might be, what are some of the changes that you could make in your evening routine that would enable you to get to bed earlier? Now let's pause the video. You try and write an analytical question, and then share it with your neighbor. A clarifying question is used to gather more information from a student to better understand his or her ideas, feelings, and thought processes. It promotes deeper thinking on the student's part, and it might even assist them in arriving at a more accurate conclusion or response. An example that I might direct to my students using the topic of sleep might be, by making that statement, Mark, are you saying that you don't think that getting more sleep would help you to be more focused in class? Is that right? Now you try it. Our next category is a convergent thinking question. And these are pretty simple questions. They're questions that result in a single correct answer. And it's also referred to as a narrow question. They're really pretty easy questions that are often thought of as lower thinking questions. An example that I might pose to my students, again using the same topic of sleep, is, did you get enough sleep last night? Pretty simple, isn't it? Now you go ahead and try it, and share it with your neighbor. A cueing question is a clue type question, and it's used to assist students in answering questions after they've had sufficient time and no one has responded yet. And generally that time period is 2 to 7 seconds. An example that I would like to share with you is, I would pose the question to my students, if you get to bed by 10 o'clock each night and wake at 5:30 each morning, how many hours of sleep will you average over the course of the week? And say I waited 2 to 7 seconds and I wasn't getting any responses and everyone just had this confused look on their face, then that's when I would pose a cueing question. That might sound something like this. how many hours would that be for each night? And if we were to multiply that by what number, how many hours would it be for a week? Now you go ahead and try it. Another kind of questioning is divergent thinking questions. They're basically reflective or thought-provoking questions. These too are usually open-ended, and they require much higher order thinking, which forces your students to think independently, creatively, and critically. And an example of the question that I might pose to one of my students might be, do you think that you experience more restful sleep on nights that you do not dream? Now you go ahead and give it a try. See what you come up with. Another kind of question is the evaluative question. And this is a question that requires a student to take a position on an issue. And what it does is it allows for more subjective and divergent responses from your students. An example of the question that I might pose to a student would be, should there be a nationwide imposed curfew that mandates all teenagers to be off the streets and in bed no later than 10 p.m. on weeknights? Now, let's go ahead and have you try it. See what you come up with. The focus question is a question that causes your students to focus on thinking regarding a specific issue. A little like a brain teaser. You might use it at the beginning of your class. An example that I might use for my students would be using, again, that topic of sleep. Predict what kind of changes we might see in our community if such a curfew went into effect the 1st of next month. Boy, you might get some real interesting comments there. You give it a try. See what kind of questions you come up with for a focus question. The probing question is our last category. The probing question makes the student think beyond single-word responses. And basically it requires students to process information by justifying or explaining their responses. So they have to support them. They have to elaborate further on them. It also promotes reflective and critical thinking skills, which is what we want to do for all of our students. An example of the probing question that I might use regarding that infamous topic of sleep, which I sure could use some right now, is how would such a nationwide curfew affect your GPA, your personal life? Now you go ahead and give it a try. So today we covered 8 different categories of questioning techniques. We started off with the analytical questions, and then we went on to clarifying, convergent, cueing questions, divergent or thinking questions, evaluative questions, focus questions, and last of all, probing questions. So do you feel like you have a pretty good grasp of them? How did you do with the questions that you created and shared with your neighbors? The best way to learn how to use these questioning techniques is just to take a risk. Just jump in and give it a try. Remember, just like anything, good questions require advanced preparation. Start thinking about them now. Include them in your lesson plans. Good luck and happy questioning.